I don't think that we can change the whole world or the whole picture, but I think that it starts with some small actions that are growing over time. And I really hope to see them growing.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. 20-Minute Leaders is a proud supporter of Make-A-Wish Israel and Tech to Peace, and is in proud collaboration with Secret Chord Ventures, J Ventures, Riverside FM, Fusion VC, Birthright Excel, J Impact, Leap, Google for Startups, and Hippo, and in media partnership with CTech. Welcome to another episode of 20-Minute Leaders. Today I have the privilege of speaking to Eynat Guez, the CEO of Papaya Global, truly a remarkable company from the Israeli ecosystem. An entrepreneur with 15 years of experience, she is a leading expert in global payroll and global workforce management. She co-founded Papaya after seeing the technology gap in the global payroll. The company combines her twin passions, technology and global HR, to start a revolution in global payroll management. Papaya's innovative software provides a total workforce solution, allowing companies to manage all of their global people, payroll, and payment operations through a single dashboard. Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. I've been waiting years to do this episode together because you are working on the intersection of, I think, one of the most fascinating fields in our society, in our economy, talking about, everybody's talking about globalization, everybody's talking about human resources and hiring, but technically it's a challenge. And as the world becomes more globalized, compliance is remaining with a question mark on how do you manage this difficult process as different generations are adapting differently to the workforce. You have different expectations and you have different environments in which people hire and people provide services. And so you're really sitting on this cutting edge advancements of enabling the world to understand and to deal with this complexity. And so I'm excited in these 20 minutes to sort of pick your brain on this structure that you've built and this thesis you've been building over these last 6 years with one of the most amazing companies that came out of Israel. And so Eynat, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Take me back 6 years. Where are you at in terms of your own life, in terms of your thinking process that leads to the creation of Papaya Global?
So, the whole creation of Papaya Global is it's boring in one sense, and it's very unusual if you're looking on the kind of other founder stories. Because in reality, I've been dealing with global workforce for 20 years now, a bit more even. And I started after my military service with a holding company doing mega projects in Africa. So we did massive relocation at the time to the continent on different sectors from different nations and eventually different kind of profession. End of 2008, beginning of 2009, I decided that I want to start my own venture. Not the best timing to start a startup, and eventually ended up with just establishing a business called Relocation Source that is providing outbound and inbound corporate relocation services to and from Israel. And a few years later, I was seeing the shift of my clients to China. Actually, the first one that asked us to relocate a few team members to China was at the time a small company called Guez, and they had the need of relocating few team members to China. And I was like, okay, what's going on in China? Why? All of a sudden it's becoming an interest to anyone. So I decided that I need to spend some time there. And this is where I started my second company called Expert Source, helping clients to eventually start a global business in China without having a local legal presence on ground. So we did everything from them on the employment side. And a few years later, I did some expansion into the continent. I really liked Asia. And a few years later, I kind of had the same thinking with myself. Okay, what I want to do when I'm going to grow old. And actually, I was browsing through tons of ideas because I think the main challenge for me is to understand if the knowledge that I have is actually interesting enough or is solid enough to transform it into a scalable product, because I was very minded of providing services and how do I solve problems, and I'm very good in operational problems and how to solve them and make things happen. But in reality, I didn't knew, I mean, with myself, if this isn't a big enough or interesting enough, and it can be a product. And when I was starting kind of my own research, I kind of realized that at the time, a lot of HRS payroll companies in the US started to grow very quickly, like Zenefit and Gusto and others.
Mhm.
And I said, okay, but what's the difference? I mean, if the need is there in the US, it's definitely, I mean, a much bigger problem globally when you are kind of leaving your main country and so on. So let's make it happen. And this is where we started with the idea of Papaya, and really kind of the incubation of this. And I mean, one sentence that you said really caught my attention, because you said, yeah, it's the fascinating word. And, I mean, I think that the first thing that I heard during the first year is, oh, this is such a boring topic. I think that the word compliance really kind of got a very different perspective over, I mean, during the 5 or 6 years that we are in business. And I think it's a good thing eventually, because, in reality, we are all paying taxes, right? It's not going to change. I mean, if we like it or not. And we all need to remain compliant. Yeah. So
I mean,
kind of
at
putting
the
it
end,
in the heart.
I think we will may talk about entrepreneurship just a little bit, but the fact that you're mentioning how today it's trivial that in hindsight, we look at it as one of the most fascinating topics. Yet 6 years ago, people didn't really want to talk about this, as it was sort of on the boring scale. Effectively, today, this is what every news article is about: the Great Resignation, the gig economy, the consumer behavior of the new workforce. So if you're looking back, and I love the differentiation of how you're seeing, these great companies, Gusto and Zenefits back in the United States, and you're saying, but I've seen the world, Africa, Asia, Israel. I've seen the needs of companies and the emerging compliance restrictions. Something needs to happen here. And so when you started out, how how did your thesis change over time? Were there different milestones throughout the last 6 or 7 years that really changed your thesis regarding what companies need and want in terms of their global payroll management?
So it's an interesting question, because I think that many things changed. I mean, at the beginning, we thought that eventually, I mean, the best use case for Papaya will be kind of small to medium businesses where you don't have infrastructures in place. And currently, I think that as the company is bigger and much more global, this is where, I mean, the scaling and eventually the pain is becoming much bigger. Obviously, I mean, the one thing is payroll is that it's a huge bottleneck and it's a recurring process, right? I mean, we are just currently on the end of May, so it means that everyone that is processing payroll is kind of breathing. I mean, because they just finish the cycle. But in less than 5 days' time, they're going to start all over again. And it's kind of a race against time. Everyone needs to be paid. Everyone needs to pay correctly. You need to collect tons of data. And every single country really kind of change things that you are not aware of, and so on. And I think that we did not realize that this is a problem that actually will meet us on growth on our fortune clients. I mean, we thought, okay, we are kind of, and because also our thesis was kind of looking on what Gusto and Zenefits are solving, and it was kind of SMB market, I mean, and so on. We were, okay, this is relatively the same. So I think this is the main thing that has changed. The second thing that has changed, and this is also why we did quite a large acquisition on the domain this year, is the understanding that our job actually does not end with the data processes of the payroll, and paying like payroll and processing the payments themselves to the payroll authorities. This is a huge pain, and that doesn't have a good solution. And I think majority of the problems in payroll, I mean, eventually lands with the fact that it's a very local process. So companies are trying to act global, but in reality, you need to become local in every single stage. And there is this huge gap between compliance and regulation and anti-laundry laundry kind of processes and so on, and what you need to do in order to be a local business in order to make it. And those are the gaps that we are trying to bridge. I also think that an interesting fact is that we started co-founded Papaya 2016. About 2017 or 2018 was the new GDPR kind of regulation coming to place. And then we realized that in reality, now you have another challenge because payroll data is the most sensitive data in the organization. With those GDPR regulation,
Yeah.
payroll companies in reality, they're not, it's a small business. You cannot ask from a small business to comply with those massive regulation just because they handle this sensitive data. And I was just telling to someone yesterday that in reality, if you're looking about the payroll evaluation, in terms of countries, in the past 5 years, the process has become massively more complex. Tons of other requirements. But from the other hand, if I'll tell you, okay, like pay 5x on every payslip, you'll say, why? Does not make sense. This is kind of, so there is also a huge gap between requirements and market requirements and legislation and so on to the need of the client, the need of the end user. And this is where we are trying to bridge. And I remember that, one of the questions that we ask ourselves, where does it going to land? What type of technology we need to eventually bring to the world in order to make it very feasible. And now I think that the challenges that we see in technology are much bigger than the one that we saw 5 years ago, because we understand that the biggest win is the efficiency, is the zero mistake, and the ability to really trust payroll as it is a full financial service and not just an HR service, which unfortunately, the world still consider payroll as an HR service.
Right. I love the distinction. To create a global company, you have to realize that you're effectively creating many local companies. And I think it's a level of maturity of a market that the simplicity behind the idea, let's go global, it has a lot of implications, and it sounds like you had to really learn it, as we say in Hebrew, on your skin, that this is the reality. And if you're looking today at, you have two sides. You have the company side and you have the consumer side, the people that are getting onboarded. They've also seen a shift, right? In the last few years. How did you experience that shift, and sort of how do you think through now as to where we are and what this new construct really needs?
So, you're taking me to the part that I like most, because I think, I currently understand that payroll needs to be reinvented. Because in reality, what happened in COVID is that everybody started kind of shifting themselves. And it was kind of temporary, okay? People follow the sun, people follow non-COVID countries, people follow places where they could work remotely. Some countries created amazing kind of tax benefits and make it very, very easy to digital nomads just to settle in. But in reality, those people, in many cases, moved, but their payroll stayed behind. So now you have one person that lives here and his payroll is actually being paid in another country, just because it's easier for him, just because the company does not want to eventually change it. And this is kind of a reality that I think that governments today don't understand that they need to change. So I think that in reality, we all need to be digital nomads and our income needs to be global. Then, if you have kind of a global account and then you can split it between countries and make it very, very easy to understand, okay, if I worked 20 days from this year in Spain and 10 days in France and so on, okay, just split the income. So I think that the whole kind of rethinking about payroll on a global kind of transformation is something that the world really needs to do. And government always kind of take time to adopt things and to understand trends and to change things. But I think that in the next 2 or 3 years, you're going to see countries that are the big winners. Because they have a very, very good tax environment. So you can settle in there, even if you're traveling from there back to your home country, you're coming as a tourist eventually. And this will be a very big driver. The second thing, this is more about the personnel, is the fact that I think that we have a very big opportunity to create to transform payroll to be the biggest benefit in the organization. Because the young generation, I'm gonna sound old now, with my 42 years old in the world, but I mean they don't. I think that their ability to currently take a wise financial kind of commitment for the long run and so on decisions is quite limited. And in reality, I mean, the biggest commitment that you're going to take is probably a mortgage to buy a house, or kind of a specific loan to something that happens currently in your life. And what you're doing at this point of time, you are taking the data from the company, you are going by yourself to banks, and you are asking them to finance you, to give you the best offer that they can. Aside from being the banks to the institutes and say, okay, I mean, let's transform it into a benefit. Let's assure that if I know that I have like a great buying power of my employees, I bring the banks to eventually kind of bring them the best benefits. And the same with flexible pay. I mean, who said that it makes sense for you to be paid every 2 weeks, every 1 month? I mean, in reality, maybe you want to be paid in a more flexible. This is kind of, in some way, you are always financing your company, right? I mean, every single day that you are working and you're not getting paid, I mean, your company has the obligations towards you. So all of this reality in taking, I mean, very flexible data and transforming the payroll and saying, okay, I mean, this is your funds. We are just keeping it because you already earned this. And now let's assure that we are utilizing it, or you can utilize it better. We will help you to utilize it better. We will bring you better benefits. We will bring you better way to utilize it. But you take the ownership, you take the control. I am not the one that dictating that on the first of every month you're going to get paid, because this is kind of what's comfortable for me, because maybe this does not meet with the things that you need. So I think that this is kind of the transformation that needs to happen. I mean, in all cases, in terms of kind of creating this something that meet your lifestyle, meet the place that you work, meet your specific needs.
So as you're now in a very different position than you were 6 years ago, with hundreds of employees, so many different customers, a brand that is associated with a leader in this field, how do you have a responsibility here to act on this vision? You're saying that some things need to happen, that lives will change as a result of these different constructs and different mechanisms. Well, it kind of makes sense that Papaya Global is one of the only solutions out there today that has the potential of actually making this leap and bringing us to this new construct. Is that something that you're taking with you? Or because it's a different mindset than, when you're just starting out a company and you're saying, well, let me make the leap and maybe one day I'll revolutionize something. No, you're actually in the leading role now.
So I agree, yes. And I think that, yes, when you're starting a company, you are in a survival mode, right? You need to assure that, you can kind of go beyond tomorrow and the day after and the day after. Now we have the rare opportunity to kind of design reality and to take this and kind of start designing the processes. So I'm very active here because I think that in reality, this can create tons of transformation in many important things between countries, between nations, improve people's life and so on. So I'm involved in some initiative, I don't think that we can change the whole world or the whole picture, but I think that it starts with some small actions that are growing over time. And I really hope to see them growing.
I love it. Eynat, I really want to thank you for spending this time with me at 10 p.m. in Israel. It's I think it's 6 years, just because you managed to get to a position where you're now designing reality and you're not in survival mode. I see that you're working just as hard, and I appreciate all the time and the energy. And more than that, the inspiration that you're providing to our ecosystem. It's really amazing to see from the side, the support that you're providing to young entrepreneurs and to the ecosystem in general. And it's and I personally love the work that you're doing with Papaya Global, and I've been excited to pick your brain for a while. 20 minutes is not nearly enough, but it's definitely enough to get the curiosity running. And thank you for everything.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.